everyone, and welcome back to Erasing the Stigma. Today, I'm so excited to be here with Mr. David Flink, who is an author, and he's also the Chief Empowerment Officer of Eye to Eye National. So, Mr. Flink, thank you so much for being here with me today. And would you be able to give listeners a snapshot of who you are and what your company, Eye to Eye National, is?
Yeah, what a joy to be here with you and all your listeners. Thank you so much for having me. Eye to Eye is an organization I founded almost 25 years ago. It'll be 25 years ago next year when I was 18 years old.
Oh, wow.
Our organization, yeah, it's pretty wild. The organization has grown and changed over the year, but its core belief has remained the same. We are about empowering the 1 in 5 people in America and in the world who are neurodiverse, meaning dyslexic, ADHD, on the spectrum. And we understand that we can do it in a lot of ways. So we provide mentoring for kids who learn differently. We do teacher training so that when kids ask what they need, the adults around them can say yes. We have an alliance club for all kids, so folks can come together in community and celebrate what is right with different thinking brains and all brains. So it's a real pleasure to be here with you. I'm so a fan of your work and what you've been doing, and I'm really excited to hear, kind of what kind of questions you have and what the listeners think of our conversation.
Yes, thank you so much. So, my first question for you is what inspired you to create Eye to Eye? Because like you said, you created it when you were pretty young.
Yeah, I think similar to perhaps your experience and some of the folks tuning in, I was a kid who grew up knowing that I had dyslexia and ADHD, but not feeling very empowered about that. And I realized that one of the reasons that was the case was I didn't really have role models of people who learn and thought like I did. And at best, the role models I had were very far away, often not even necessarily doing something that was similar to what I wanted to do. Um, to go into a local school, I was going to college at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, and I went to a local school and found this amazing teacher, Maureen Kenner, who was head of the special ed program there. And I knocked on her door, room 4, and I said, "Hey, do you have any kids that maybe I can hang out with and spend some time with?" And she agreed. And over time, I found a bunch of other neurodiverse young people from around Rhode Island, and we started sharing our stories. And what's kind of cool is that all of us came from different backgrounds and experiences. So the through line was that we all had this different thinking brain identity. But I was a white guy from Atlanta, working with kids, and meanwhile, one of our mentors just to my right was a person of color from rural Alabama, and then somebody else who was from California, and just the ability to come together and see what was a beautiful, diverse community with the through line of sharing our shared stories of neurodiversity was something that was kind of magic, and it's been a great journey watching this work expand. But I think to the point of what we're doing today, there's still a lot of stigma out there, and those, it's an effort to continue to fight the stigma and help kids feel seen and heard and valued. So that was the beginning, and it turns out it has been my life story, and I feel really lucky to be able to say that.
That is just fantastic. And I think that's such a cool thing that you're saying how just the neurodiversity aspect of it brought you together with so many people. And I feel like that's such an important thing to recognize because the common notion about neurodiversity is often it separates you from other people. But what you just said, it brings you together with people that you might have never met before. And I really love Eye to Eye National because, like you mentioned previously, you are bringing kids together with mentors and with role models and people that they can look up to. And that is so important because through my work with Color and Confidence, one of my favorite tips that I've picked up along the way that I try to communicate to all parents that I talk to with kids um, who have language-based learning differences is that if their kid is interested in a certain area, such as maybe they're interested in building. I always suggest, why don't you look up engineers who have a language-based learning difference? So your child has someone to look up to. But what's so cool about Eye to Eye National is it brings those role models to your kids. So I just find that amazing. And if any listeners go to the Eye to Eye National website, it says different is not deficient. And I think this quote is so powerful. So I was wondering if you would be able to share what this quote means to you.
Oh, thanks for that invitation and celebration of these ideas. I think a lot of times, and especially thinking back to my early identification, we spend a lot of time kind of using language and talking to kids about what's wrong with them. I mean, even I remember hearing the word dyslexia and thinking, oh, that does not sound like a thing I want. That sounds awful. And of course, now I realize it's my superpower. And, because of my dyslexia, so many wonderful things have happened in my life. And I think you point to a lot of our society that has benefited from dyslexia everywhere from, creative folks who we all sort of love and celebrate, whether that be like the arts or whether that be the person who invented your iPhone. It's something that I think we learn to appreciate. So, breaking down the stigma for me has always been about like not thinking about how kids are broken, but thinking about how kids are beautiful and brains are beautiful. That was really the inception of Eye to Eye. It's just like if we have these near peer stories to flip the script on what we're saying about kids, it could actually change the world.
I think that that is so amazing. And that's just such an important thing to recognize that kids who are either dyslexic or they have other learning differences, they are not broken. And like you said, these learning differences can be your superpower because it gives you a way to really see the world in a different way than many other people. So, is peer tutoring like Eye to Eye does, is it more influential in your experience when the mentor has the same learning difference as the mentee? Because as you were saying, if I was being mentored by someone with a learning difference and I see that they are successful, I might be able to recognize that I am not broken because someone else who has the same learning difference as I do is going off to do amazing things. So in your experience, is that what you have found?
I would argue it's both and. So I think when we look at like our near peer mentoring program, which indeed has folks mentoring young people who have the exact same experience as they do, certainly it's a profound and meaningful experience for these younger kids to be able to look up to somebody and say, oh, okay, you're just like me and you're making it. I would also argue that it's important. It's why we have our LD Alliance clubs, where we bring in the 1 in 5 who are neurodiverse and the 4 in 5 who are their allies, to be able to come together and say, look, we're all living in this world together, and we have to learn to celebrate each other. And I think it did not take the past couple of years and this very trying time through the pandemic to see how, unfortunately, it is easy to point out each other's differences and separate us, but I also think those can be the things that bring us together. So I think it's both. And I think it just depends on a person's ability to be a really good listener and to be empathetic. And, those are muscles that we have to practice, develop. And a big part of our curriculum, whether it's, talking to kids, talking to parents, talking to teachers, helping folks proud of their own stories and also be willing to listen to others who have perhaps a slightly different story.
Yes, and I think that is so important, hearing other stories and seeing life through someone else's perspective. So what advice would you give to someone who's listening to this who might not have a learning difference, but they're in that group, people who want to be an ally to those who have a learning difference? How would you advise them to open that line of communication and create that safe space so they can talk to someone who has a learning difference and learn about their experiences?
I think we talk a lot about safe spaces and the wish for them. And, a concept that has been shared with me that I appreciate, in fact, there are rarely safe spaces. Um, there are more often the need for brave spaces. So my encouragement to folks who are tuning in today, you're already in the club. I'm sure you are on the journey to make the world a better place, and probably already doing that in your daily lives. And I think recognizing it takes bravery on all parties. So, recognizing that it might take bravery if you're an ally to ask some questions and potentially get answers you didn't expect, which might require you to be different in your orientation tomorrow than you were today towards people who are different than you. And also, story, it might be the first time you've ever told it out loud, or it might be something that's sensitive, and being able to figure out a way to tell that story is, again, a muscle that I think takes practice. So, I think a lot about actually, if you just look at pop culture of recent, both Beyonce and Lizzo. I'm sure no one was sitting here thinking we're going to talk about them, but I think they're models of people who can talk about creating great spaces. Both of them released songs in the past month that had some language that the disability community didn't like, and in the spirit of bravery, they heard from that community because folks shared their stories, and they immediately changed their lyrics and their songs. Lizzo did a particularly good job, I thought, in sharing why she chose to do that. And if they can do it, so can we. So, I really just invite people to be brave, and I think that's the best recipe for being a good listener and being able to create change.
And I think that is a perfect example that you brought up because it really does take bravery from both ends. But especially if you're not someone who's dealing with a learning difference or something, anything else, honestly, on a day-to-day basis, you might not understand how someone who's dealing with this issue is feeling or what they are going through. And so you might say or do something like you mentioned Lizzo or Beyonce saying something that they didn't necessarily understand was wrong or why it was wrong, but it was so important that they were receptive to the criticism they got for making a mistake because what I believe is that it takes a lot of bravery, like you said, to recognize that you made a mistake because you did not understand the issue and fixing that mistake. Um, and so I do agree that there's bravery on both ends of it. And something else that takes bravery, going back to eye, is for people who have dealt with learning differences all their lives and might have struggled throughout school, but who step up to be a mentor to help others not face the same struggles that they were facing or to guide others through those struggles. So, how is how is it influential for someone with a learning difference to become a mentor in the Eye program?
Um, Such a nice question. I think, for the now almost 25 years that I've seen people step up and learn not how to be neurodiverse, for the mentors, they already know what that means. They've lived that life, but choose to spend your time in this generous way. I think it takes time if you've not particularly, if you've not necessarily worked with young people before, you do have to learn how to communicate your story, how to support them in their journey. But it's a joy. I mean, I'll always say I'm like the chief chaperone now at Eye to Eye. I don't know if middle school students really look at a 42-year-old and see themselves, but I know that when I was 18 and mentoring my first mentee, I learned as much from him as he learned from me. And I think for folks who are wondering, how do I kind of get involved, you certainly can go to the Eye to Eye website, and there's some easy ways to get involved in our work. But I also would just say, it's just a matter of choosing to spend your time in this way. There's lots of ways to share your story and hear others. And, if it's not Eye to Eye, there's a million other places to do good in the world. And just, it's a choice. I always say the choices you make define you. So I hope folks listening today will continue to make the choices to do better in the world and leave the world better tomorrow than it was today.
And I 100% agree that it is a choice. And like you said, even if the first step that you want to take is listening to someone who has a learning difference, that is an amazing first step. And so, through the Eye to Eye program, another choice that people can make, specifically educators, is joining the professional learning program, which is for, if I'm correct, middle school and high school educators. So, would
Yep.
you be able to describe or basically encourage why educators
Hmm.
should join this program?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I should say my mom, in some ways, was the inspiration for this. My mom, who's my hero, and shout out to all those moms who might be listening. She did so much for me, supporting me, and also she was an educator. She taught for 40 years. She actually just retired. So shout out to all those mom teachers. And, for her, she would be the first to tell you that even though she thought she had a good sense of how to support students along the way, just raising me threw her some curveballs. And she's often said, being an educator with a kid who is neurodiverse helped her learn how to even be a better educator. So in some ways, the spirit of our program is that we help educators walk through the journey of what it might be like if they have a neurodiverse young person in their classroom. And, we know that I'm a trained educator myself. Most trained educators get at best one class in how to reach students who are neurodiverse, and neurodiverse students spend about 80% of their time in gen ed classrooms. So this program is really a way to help teachers understand the experiences of the kids in their classroom, give them some practical tools to better reach them, and do what I know every educator is signed up to do, which is just be able to reach their kids in a more effective and accommodating way. So we've built this program. One of the, I would say, silver linings of the pandemic is that we can now do it almost anytime, anywhere. We can do it in person. We can do it virtually. It's modular. It can be synchronous learning. So we tried to both apply the best practices that we would hope teachers learn in the program to the program. And from what we're hearing from educators, they really like it. They really appreciate it. So we're gonna keep building it as fast as we can. And I hope some folks today listening will reach out to us and get involved.
Yes, me too, because I think that that is such an amazing opportunity, especially because at least all the educators that I have come in contact with, and I'm sure many educators or most educators really just want children in their classroom to succeed. And that's their end goal is to see these children thrive. And if you have a child who is neurodiverse, you just might not know the best way to instruct this child, or you might not have the tools in your toolbox of what you can do best to help this child succeed. And so I just think this is such a unique and wonderful opportunity for all educators. And it's definitely beneficial for all students in that educator's class to have someone who really understands how they learn and how to educate and teach them. So I just commend you guys for creating that program because I think that it is so wonderful. Um,
Well, thanks.
So you said in the beginning that you dealt with a learning difference. And so if you had the opportunity to become a peer mentor and you were able to mentor your younger self, what is one thing that you would say to your younger school age self?
What's one thing I would say to my younger self? Well, I think it was certainly the thing I did say to my mentees when I first started working with them, which was, they're not broken. their story matters. There's something beautiful in their brain. And, sometimes the environment around them has to shift for them to be successful. And I'm here to help make that shift happen.
I think that is wonderful. And I think that is a very important note that sometimes it is the environment that is around you that has to shift. And when students who are neurodiverse are not in an necessarily accepting environment, they might feel like it's the other way around, that they have to shift, but it's not. And like you said, these kids, all kids, but these kids too, are wonderful and they do have something beautiful and amazing in their brain. So I really hope that anyone listening to this can tell their kids what you just said, because that is such important advice. And on the note of advice, the last question that I will ask you is, what is one thing that you think our listeners can do to erase stigmas behind language-based learning differences?
Well, storytelling has always been the through line in my life. And as I've seen change in the world, it's because of stories. It's because people hear stories, we tell stories, learn somebody else's story, and really understand it. So my provocation to folks listening is to tell your story, to listen to others. You've heard hopefully some stories today that resonated somewhere. They're now yours. I'll tell you, when I sat down to write my first book, Thinking Differently, HarperCollins came to me and said, "We're going to write a great book together." I said, "Terrific, let's do it." And I thought I was going to be like a journalist. And I captured all these amazing stories and I put them down in print. And I sort of proudly brought in this manuscript to my publisher and said, "We have a great book here." And they read it and they said, "I think there's some really beautiful things in here, but where's your story?" I
Mm.
said, "Oh, this work's never been about me. I don't really want to tell my story." And we looked at all these amazing stories and they said, "If you're going to ask other people to tell their story, you have to do the same." So I had to go back and rewrite the whole book. And for folks who maybe go pick up Thinking Differently, and you can find it on my website, davidflink.com, you'll see I did that. And I've been telling my story and the story of our neurodiverse community ever since. So I hope folks choose to do the same in ways that feel appropriate for them. They don't have to go write a book, but their stories matter.
I think that that is such amazing advice. And like you were saying, storytelling can be done in so many different modes. I mean, there's definitely oral storytelling, but there's also through writing. Like writing a story is such an amazing way to tell stories. Or something that I love about art is that you can tell so many stories through art and just let your creativity shine. So I think that is wonderful
Mm-hmm.
advice, to tell stories in whatever way you feel comfortable and just to show the world who you are, because everyone does matter, like you previously said. And I do suggest to listeners to pick up your book. So I will also have your website and your book on my website as well, so everyone can see it, because your story also deserves to be read by all of my listeners, because you have such a wonderful story. But I really do agree. I think storytelling is just such a wonderful thing, because I feel like the more we talk about our different experiences, and especially about language-based learning differences, the less stigmatized it becomes, because the less falsehoods there can be or misrepresentations there can be about these learning differences.
All
So
right, let's do it. I agree. I think we're going to change the world together.
yes, I hope so. I hope we can make a difference in one listener at a time, and hopefully one reader of your book as well. So I really do appreciate you coming on and giving so much wonderful advice to me and my listeners. And your company, Eye to Eye International, is just wonderful. I love it so much. So I really hope all of my listeners can gain some advice from this conversation, and also hopefully look more into the Eye to Eye program as a resource to continue this journey with their language-based learning differences or their child's language-based learning difference. So really, thank you again for coming to speaking with me.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the work you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.